The Trump administration just made a big announcement regarding global trade, which directly impacts not only the European Union, but Mexico as well. This comes from the Irish Times. Donald Trump announces 30% tariffs on goods from the European Union. Now, which countries are involved in the European Union? Let me just check this real quick and show you this complete list. So, the European Union consists of 27 member states, i.e., countries, as of July 12th. And this is the list. So, this 30% tariff will affect every one of these countries: Austria, Belgium, Bulgaria, Croatia, Cyprus, the Czech Republic, Denmark, Estonia, Finland, France, Germany, Greece, Hungary, Ireland, Italy, Latvia, Lithuania, Luxembourg, Malta, the Netherlands, Poland, Portugal, Romania, Slovakia, Slovenia, Spain, and Sweden. So let's get into this article here. That is, it's a lot of countries. A lot are going to be affected by this, but ultimately it's a good thing. Now, there's certain rumors swirling about the EU retaliating and increasing their tariffs to match Trump's tariffs, and he's already made an announcement about that. He's already ahead of that curve. So I believe it's actually mentioned in the article, so I'll just get straight into it. So, U.S. President Donald Trump has said he will charge a 30% tariff on trade coming from the EU from August 1st, in a move that significantly sets back negotiations to avert a trade war. Negotiators from both sides have spent several intense weeks working on the broad strokes of an agreement in principle aimed at stopping Mr. Trump following through on threats to double import duties that he has charged on European goods sold to the U.S. Officials in the European Commission who have been leading the tariff negotiations had believed a deal was ready to be signed pending the approval of Mr. Trump. In a letter to European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen, and I don't want to say that her name is full on evil, but that's a pretty ominous name, Ursula. I mean, that's kind of fitting for an EU president, if you ask me. Mr. Trump instead said he would raise import duties charged on goods sold into the U.S. from the EU to 30%, a significant increase on the blanket 10% tariffs he introduced in April. Our relationship has been, unfortunately, far from reciprocal, said President Trump. Starting on August 1st, 2025, we will charge the European Union a tariff of only 30% on EU products sent into the United States, separate from all sectoral tariffs, he wrote. The correspondence effectively blows up progress made in talks between EU and U.S. officials to draw up a preliminary trade agreement. In the letter, which was posted on his Truth Social platform, Mr. Trump warned efforts to retaliate with counter tariffs on U.S. products would be met with higher tariffs in return. So this is what he mentioned about this, because China was playing this game and Trump fought right back. So, quote, if for any reason you decide to raise your tariffs and retaliate, then whatever the number you choose to raise them by will be added on to the 30% that we charge, he said. So essentially, if they want to jack up their tariffs up to, let's say, 50%, the way I'm reading this is that Trump will match the 50% and then add the 30% on top of it. So if they want to jump tariffs from the U.S. up to 100%, well, then Trump's going to make it 130%, and on and on and on. So in other words, he's got him by the by the short curlies, essentially. So anyway, quote, please understand that the 30% number is far less than what is needed to eliminate the trade deficit disparity we have with the European Union, he wrote. And I'm sure that's actually true. The letter, dated July 11th, said the U.S. looked forward to working with the EU as a trading partner for many years to come. So, according to Jack Power, I think he actually wrote this article that I'm reading. Here is the letter Donald Trump sent Ursula von der Leyen, announcing plans to put tariffs of 30% on EU trade in what is a significant setback to negotiations to work out a preliminary EU-U.S. trade agreement. So it's a fairly lengthy letter there, but yeah, you can find it on X. In a statement, Ms. von der Leyen said U.S. tariff rates of 30% would disrupt essential transatlantic supply chains to the detriment of businesses and consumers on both sides. Quote, we remain ready to continue working toward an agreement by August 1st. At the same time, we will take all necessary steps to safeguard EU interests, including the adoption of proportionate countermeasures if required, the head of the EU Commission said. A Commission spokeswoman said the EU executive had been given notice a letter from Mr. Trump was coming in advance of his social media post on Saturday. Yeah, that they could have worded that a little better, but anyway. Meanwhile, oh wow. Towie Search Mikhail Martin said the EU had engaged in good faith to reach agreement on a positive and balanced way forward with the US. Quote, I hope that negotiations will continue in the weeks ahead and that they will be successful, he said. Um, Tanisti and Minister for Foreign Affairs Simon Harris said Mr. Trump's letter was deeply regrettable and that there was no necessity to hike tariffs already imposed. The EU is at the negotiating table and will remain there. Now is the time to redouble our efforts and seek to achieve positive results in the time available, he said. Well, I mean, the positive results would be paying the 30% tariffs that were set. But anyway, Mr. Trump took aim at EU regulations he views as barriers to U.S. products, such as food safety rules that bar chlorine washed chicken from the European market. If you wish to reopen your heretofore closed trading markets to the United States and eliminate your tariff and non tariff policies and trade barriers, we will perhaps consider an adjustment to this letter. These tariffs may be modified upward or downward depending on our relationship with your country, he wrote. Levies of 10% have been charged on practically all goods sold from the EU into the US since early April, with steel and cars facing even higher tariffs. Across the board, tariffs of 30% would pose huge challenges to European businesses who trade with the US, effectively cutting many out of the market. Mr. Trump also announced a 30% tariff on Mexican goods beginning August 1st. Earlier this week, Mr. Trump issued new tariff announcements for a number of countries, including Japan, South Korea, Canada, and Brazil. Focus now turns to how the EU will respond and whether it will try to cajole the Trump administration back to the negotiating table or retaliate with its own levies on U.S. products. Diplomats from the 27 EU states have been called in to an emergency meeting in Brussels on Sunday to discuss the latest twist in the transatlantic trade row. The commission, which sets the union's trade policy, had largely finalized a package of EU counter tariffs in the event talks collapse without an agreement. Let me say that again. The Commission, which sets the union's trade policy, had largely finalized a package of EU counter tariffs in the event talks collapse without an agreement. An initial batch of tariffs targeted 21 billion euros worth of U.S. trade, hitting soybeans, oranges, and steel. They had been put on ice while negotiations took place during Mr. Trump's first 90-day pause, suspending the higher rates of his Liberation Day tariffs. The Commission has drawn up a second package of tariffs on up to 95 billion euros worth of U.S. products, targeting Boeing and the aviation sector, automobiles, bourbon, medical devices, and agricultural produce. It is understood the size of that second retaliatory package has been scaled back to impact around 70 billion euros worth of U.S. trade after national capitals lobbied to remove some U.S. products and industries from the hit list. So that's where we're at right now. We'll see how that plays out. August 1st, it's looming. It's coming up. It's only a few weeks away. So just to finish off, just one thing here. How much money will the 30% EU tariff bring to the U.S. annually? So based on available information, this is a reasonable estimate. So in 2023, the EU exported 503 billion euros in goods to the U.S., converting this to USD using an approximate exchange rate of 1.1 USD to euro for simplicity, as exchange rates do fluctuate. This equates to roughly $553.3 billion. A 30% tariff applied to this value, assuming no change in import volumes, would generate $553.3 billion times 30% or zero point 0.3 is $165.99 billion annually. So it's not a small number. It's a fairly large number. However, tariffs typically reduce import volumes due to higher prices, a concept known as trade elasticity. Studies, such as those from the European Commission, suggest that a tariff hike like this could reduce EU exports to the U.S. by 1.1 to 1.5 initially. That's not too bad, with broader estimates of 6 to 11% for import volume declines due to global trade effects. Well, I mean, we're still going to end up ahead if they're going to reduce the imports by 11% and we still have the 30% tariff imposed. I mean, seems fairly reasonable to me. Even though, yes, our products are going to go up initially, short term, long term. We'll just have to see. But it's all in supply and demand. If they charge way too much, then the demand is going to go way down. And therefore, they're going to have an oversupply and then they're going to have to charge less. I mean, that's kind of how it works. So, but anyway, to account for this, let's conservatively assume a 10% reduction in import volume, which is 553.3 billion times zero point 0.9 times zero point 0.3, which is 149.39 billion annually. So, yeah, so there's some caveats to this. The retaliation from the EU, they have signaled countermeasures such as 25% tariffs on U.S. goods, which could reduce U.S. exports and offset revenue gains. As well as non tariff barriers, the U.S. calculation of EU tariffs at 39% includes value added taxes and other measures, which the EU disputes as non tariff barriers, potentially inflating the justification for the 30% rate. And also economic shifts. Higher tariffs may shift trade to other partners or domestic production, further reducing import volumes over time. And finally, pass through. Research indicates near 100% pass through of tariffs to U.S. consumers, increasing prices and potentially dampening demand. So, thus, a 30% tariff on EU goods could generate approximately about 150 to 166 billion dollars per year. So that's kind of where we stand right now. We'll just have to see what happens. August 1st, it's looming. It's around the corner. Um, Obviously, the EU they're holding an emergency meeting tomorrow, Sunday, and I guess we're just gonna have to see what they're gonna decide on. I mean, not sure if there's really much that they can decide on. I mean, Trump gave them 90 days to come up with something fair. Sounds like it's not really working. Trump seems disappointed in what seems like the lack of progress in negotiations between the EU and the US. So he's going to put out a 30% tariff. So we'll just have to see how that plays out. But anyway, thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe, and I'll see you later.